I missed last week and didn't post an interview. My personal life went into a tailspin. We had 2 unexpected deaths in the family, so my wife Kelly and I had to make a trip back to New Jersey for funerals. Having said that, I'm thankful to everyone for their patience and support. When I got back and started editing my interview with Sgt Tokarz, I found lots of technical problems. The original recording wasn't very good because of where we recorded, so it took a lot of editing. I'm not a sound engineer, so I had to learn a lot on the fly. Then, just to add icing to my little cake of mishaps, at one point I stopped the recording rather than pausing and didn't record the last half hour or so. It seriously wasn't my week for lots of wins. But I'm posting this anyway, and here's why. If you've never met Master Sergeant Tokarz, you should consider adding it to your Air Force bucket list. This is a man who really gets what the Air Force is about, and what it means to be a senior NCO. He isn't perfect, like any of us, and certainly isn't a saint, but he's tough, a little crusty, fair, direct, and genuinely admired by the folks who work for him, and he admires them as well. And he's admired by his supervisors and commanders. I'm pretty sure I'll get ribbed for giving him such a glowing review, but I really don't care. The sort of senior leadership we have at the detachment here at For Leonard Wood are the sort of NCOs we could all emulate. Sgt Rockey, Sgt Allen, Mr. Willians, Mr. Little, Mr. Silk, Mr. Wheeler, Mr. McDowell, and I'll even add in the Master Sergeants Gibbs, Turba, Bowman, Gallager, McCabe, and I know Gallager hasn't sewed on yet, but he will be soon enough, and Master Sgt Zerby. I'll add them all to that list. These are by far the finest senior NCOs and retired senior NCOs I've come across in more than 22 years of service. As I listened to the portion of the interview I did record, I scrambled to take lots of notes. Master Sergeant Tokarz has a way of cutting to the heart of a matter that really shouldn't be missed. When I first sat with him, and when I listened again, I got chills down my spine when he cut to the truth of some of the issues we're facing in the Air Force today. I hope you'll take notes too, and get as much out of it as I did. Well, give me the 5-minute cliff note of the cliff note of Sergeant Tokarz.
Of me?
Because I know you came here from Scott.
Yep.
and I know that you were...
I started out as an aircraft mechanic.
You did?
Yep.
I didn't know that.
So I went to tech school at Shepherd, Aircraft Electrical Environmental Systems. I was actually part of 364th as a tech trainee.
I was 362nd.
Okay.
But I was a helicopter crew chief.
Oh, gotcha.
And this was in 94.
I was 98 when I got there. I joined in December of 97. I got to tech school in 98. So.
Huh. Interesting.
But yep, so I started there. I went to Dover, Delaware as a C5 mechanic, and then from there I got an assignment out to Ramstein. While I was there, I had my firstborn son, and he had a tumor in his airway. So we got him back to the States, did a lot of surgeries. They moved us back to McDowell from Germany. Long story short, they couldn't treat my son's
condition. Where's McDowell? Is it Florida?
Tampa. Yep.
Tampa, okay.
Long story short, they couldn't treat my son's condition there, so I had to agree to cross-train. So I left McDowell after 3 months and showed up at Andrews Air Force Base direct to duty as a vehicle operator.
Wow.
Shortly after I got there, the opportunity came up to deploy, and so I was part of the Air Force's first gun truck company, the 494th Truck Company out of Mosul, Iraq. Did my tour over there, and once I got back, I got tasked to go TDY down to Camp Bullis for the basic combat convoy course. I was a TDY instructor there for 5-6 months. And then they asked me to become a permanent instructor. So I was actually a permanent instructor down there for 6 years.
Oh, wow.
I did my 4-year tour, controlled tour, just like it is. It just wasn't a CCF accredited course. And then I got asked to extend for 2 years to run the course as they got a whole new batch of instructors in, because we're an expeditionary course, so it was only supposed to be, a year or two, and we ended up being there for a lot longer. So, and then I ended up finishing out the length of the course. I got an assignment to Scott Air Force Base, and they ended up shutting the course down shortly thereafter. So, but I went to Scott from there. There I did the vehicle ops thing. I worked for the wing commander for about 18 months or so, and deployed to Al Udeid. And while I was there, they asked if I wanted to be DSD'd to be a tech school instructor. And I said, no, thank you.
Yeah.
Because I had already been an instructor for a long time.
Right.
But my career field manager talked to me. He said it would be a good move and I'd be a good fit for it. And so I said, okay. So I've been here now for, got here in November. So a year and a half almost.
Okay.
Coming up on a year and a half, I think.
Yeah, you've been here long enough that, in my mind, you're becoming part of the landscape.
Oh, yeah.
Like, you're not one of the new guys anymore.
Yeah, so it's been like 16 months, I think, something like that.
Yeah.
I've been here, so. And then, in December, they asked me to come over and work with the Dirt Boys out here at the P&E Schoolhouse, and so I got here right, I think, the day before Exodus started. So
right.
I've been here for the last couple months now, so.
One thing that I've noticed, because I'm a cross trainee too,
yeah.
And I started out on the flight line, and it seems, and this might be like a civil engineering thing, and particularly an EA thing, but I noticed that people who started their Air Force career on the flight line have a different work ethic than folks who started out in civil engineering or in vehicle ops or something like that. Because on the flight line, it's a weird animal. You can't. If nobody's ever done it before, you can't explain.
I wouldn't say
what it's like.
It's 100% truth because I've worked with some vehicle ops guys that outwork me to death.
Obviously,
there's always those.
Right.
But no, so yeah, working the flight line, there was no. I mean, that's all it was. And so, for me, my journey throughout the Air Force has come with a lot of change. Because in the maintenance world, that's what you did. You turned wrenches. Right. I didn't know what an airman's council was, an NCO council. I didn't know what volunteering was. I mean, none of that mattered. Professional development, education. I mean, none of that was even talked to until I was an instructor at BC3. I mean, they had mentioned it during when I first came over to vehicle ops, and sure, I've heard of other people taking classes. Yeah. But it just wasn't the thing. It wasn't the thing to do. So, so my journey has definitely come full circle to where, now I understand the importance of some of those additional things or see their part in the big picture of the Air Force and how they all kind of interrelate.
Right.
So, but yeah, so that's me that I got down here.
Well, one of the things I wanted to talk to you about, so when I was coming up with my list, remember a couple months ago I put out the list at Commander's Call?
Yep.
And one of the reasons why I put this on my list is because I remember back when I was I think I was a staff sergeant. I hadn't made tech yet. And I got to Elmendorf, and that's when I got my first flight of airmen. And before that, I'd deployed, and I had like 2 or 3 people that worked for me, or I'd be given a project, and, that I'd grab an airman and we'd go do it together. But a lot of the time I was just the lowest ranking person around. Or with EAs, we find a lot that we work with civilians a lot. And so you'll just be like one EA and you'll be assigned to an engineer and you just have to go do whatever the engineer needs. You research this, you find this, you do the survey, whatever. And there's not a lot of time to develop those like specific kind of managerial skills. Some people have it, right. I didn't. But when I showed up at Elmendorf and I walked into this room and there was 8 airmen in there and I was suddenly in charge of them and I realized that I had no skill set. I had nothing to pull from. I had, kind of guesswork, or you reach back to the things that you learned in ALS and, you're trying to figure out like, how do I get these group of people to pull together?
Right.
And it was a weird dynamic too, and things didn't go well because I got to Elmendorf, and things are a little more slow pace up there. And I had just come from Korea, where everything is just full throttle all the time. So trying to kind of find that sweet spot to get people to do the things that they needed to do, that was one challenge to overcome. But the other half of that, though, is the reason why I wanted to talk about this subject is because I hear a lot around the detachment, around the Air Force, is that by the time somebody gets to staff sergeant or technical sergeant, they should have certain skill sets. And that irritates me. Because, while that's true, like I don't know why, but I keep picking on Sergeant Craddock.
Yeah.
So his name comes up a bit. But, I mean, I like him, I respect him, and I know he can take it.
So let's say like Sergeant Craddock shows up, and now he's a brand new technical sergeant, and he goes to Camp Swampy somewhere. When he shows up there, people are going to look at him as a technical sergeant and assume that he should know X, Y, and Z. They're going to say, well, you were at the schoolhouse, so you should know this, and that, and the other thing. And I think we have a tendency to just stop the thought right there. Instead of saying, oh, you should know this, but, oh, you don't. So now I'm going to spend some time mentoring you. Now I'm going to spend some time training you.
So I think part of like where that's coming from is kind of like a mix of the way things used to be and not necessarily the way they are right now, but we're kind of blending, because we're in that a huge transitionary period right now where I don't know the best way to term it, but everything is focused on positioning people and trying to make them promotion eligible as early as possible, and trying to help them progress through the ranks, through the professional development, whether it's airman leadership school, in residence type stuff, distance learning type stuff. But one of the things that we find with cutbacks and people deciding not to make this a career is that there's lots of vacancies in positions, so it's causing some people to promote faster than they used to. So back in the day, you used to have staff sergeants that were staff sergeants for years before they made tech sergeant. Tech sergeant was really tough to make. Master sergeant was tough to make. Everything, it was just a more lengthy period for promotion stuff, where I think, when I was hearing about it, average time to make master sergeant was like 17, 18 years. And now it's starting to be like 11, 12, 13 years is when you're making it. So you're talking 4 or 5 years earlier. And so with that being said, it's just the experience level of some NCOs, especially given the assignment that they have. So, for example, a tech school instructor, let's say they make staff sergeant relatively early. They get vectored, DSD'd to come here to the schoolhouse, where maybe they didn't have an airman that was assigned to them, because if they had just put on staff, maybe that reporting period hadn't closed out. So now they lack that supervisory experience, at least the one-on-one, rater, ratee, where doing feedbacks and stuff like that is part of the norm. And then you come here where everyone around you is a staff sergeant, so there's no airman to rate on. So you spend your 4 years here potentially not rating on anybody. And so then that just furthers the gap between you and your peers that are on the outside, who across the 4 years have 2 or 3 airmen that they have to rate on. I think part of that's an individual responsibility, where they have to understand where their shortfalls are. And that's where we as leaders or supervisors have to counsel our individuals, our airmen, before they leave, on what's going to be expected of them when they get out into the operational Air Force from the tech training environment or from the special duty environment. Because I'm sure it's not just us in tech training. I'm sure TIs deal with the same thing. MTLs deal with the same thing.
Sure.
All of the new DSD processes, it's one of the things where, yes, it's a benefit because it helps you, it helps develop you, you gain certain skill sets, but there's also other ones that you're not mastering in your absence. So
I think I've talked to Sgt Rockey and Sgt Allen about that kind of concept, and one of the other podcasts I'm going to do, I called it Getting Ahead of the Bullet. And my initial idea was helping people plan out their year and plan out, like, if I want to get that must promote or promote now or, NCO of the year, then I need to have, I need to do these sorts of things so that I can be in the running for that.
So a lot of that,
one of the other things, though, is that is one of the things that they brought back from the Senior NCO Academy is this phrase called deliberate development. And I think that all kind of encompasses that whole thing, where, like, you look at, a staff sergeant that you've got, and before they PCS, you'd have to be cognizant of the fact that, hey, you missed out on these skill sets. So we'd have to use some of that deliberate development to be able to at least get them aware of that before we launch them. Is that what you're talking about?
No, so I think realistically where it starts is with the individual. I mean, you have to do a holistic look at, okay, who am I? What do I know? What do I know that I'm about to get into? So, I'll talk about my experience, for example. Like you're talking about the must promote, the promote now, which I don't think that we should be striving for that. That's my own personal opinion. I think we need to strive to position ourselves to be competitive by knowing, what the criteria is that the commander's looking for when he decides to hand those things out. But for me, when it came time for senior master, like you asked when I first came in, I missed by 23 points. I moved up from last year, so that's good for me. But I had to just a little bit of time, I sat down and I really digested everything that I was lacking at personally. Okay, so I don't have this, or I didn't do this. So let me make sure, and I made out my list of what I need to do across the next year to make sure that I'm competitive to get a wing strat next time around. And with that wing strat, hopefully position myself with a better board score, and then hopefully make rank. But I know that there's 3 or 4 things that I needed to do. But somebody else could look and try to see those things and say, okay, well, I think you might need to do this, but I know where I lack. I know better. I know me better than anybody else knows me.
Yeah.
So that's what I think the first step is these individuals, and it comes back into play with the leadership stuff too, is what your strengths are and what your weaknesses are. My time management skills are not the best. I'm somewhat of a procrastinator. My only saving grace is that I work really good under pressure. And so I tend to be able to accomplish the tasks on time.
Right.
Maybe not as early as I could, but I know that, and that's one thing, I talk to my supervisors about it. You want to know something about me? Okay, here's what I got. Yeah. If you want some specific things done, then you give me specific guidelines on when you want it, and I'll meet it. But if you just tell me I got something to just work on, then
it'll never happen.
It'll take me, well, it will. It just won't happen like that.
Yeah.
Because then I'm trying to figure out what the highest priority is. And sometimes, depending on the day, there's 37 priorities, and maybe you don't have time to figure out which one is the biggest fire that you need to try to put out. So
just to pause it for a second, there's a book. In fact, I'm listening to it again right now. I'm a big obnoxious audiobook listener, but there's a book called Getting Things Done.
Yep.
Have you heard of this? Yeah, just add it to your reading list, your listening list, or whatever. And this is my second time going through it, and the first time I picked up so many time management skills, because he goes through in just nauseating detail about, well, I guess that's not really much of a pitch, is it? Nauseating. Yeah, listen to this nauseating book. It's going to be great.
I'll listen to it on a 2-hour drive and fall asleep at the wheel.
Well, the strange thing is that it's about getting organized, like how to write things down and how to put your thoughts in one place and organize it and prioritize it. And it sounds like it would be the most boring thing that would put you to just mind-numbing sleep, coma for years.
Right.
But the way that it's written, it's so applicable that as you're listening to or reading or however you approach it, but for me, as I was listening to it, I'm constantly thinking about, I've got this thing in my life, I've got this thing in my life, I can plug this in, I can plug, So just the process of listening to the book helped me organize my thoughts and start to, kind of put things into place.
Yeah, so I'll have to check that out.
But I get kind of manic sometimes. So when I feel myself getting into one of my manic swings, I'll listen to the book so that I've got a good skill set. So when I'm like crazy and I got all this energy, I'll go through and get everything organized so that when I go down one of my slumps, everything just is kind of like smooth sailing.
Oh, gotcha.
So that's my strategy. I can feel myself on an upswing right now, so I'm starting to listen to it again. I'm like, oh, okay.
Sweet. Yeah, I'll have to check that out. That's like what you were talking about, like with the skill sets. So for me, I was very fortunate. When I went to the Basic Combat Combo course, I was a team instructor, so we had 3 different flights of students. Mm-hmm. And there was roughly 8 to 10 instructors that were on a team, but then we had 60 students at a shop. So we were, that was our class every single day, 60 students in a classroom, and 1 or 2 instructors that are teaching until you go out and do the hands-on stuff, and that's where everyone else comes into play. Which I did for 2 years. So, I was responsible for the instruction of 60 students every day. Mm-hmm. And then I was the second in command on the team of instructors on the flight that I was on. And so, I had my boss and then the other instructors on to make sure that they were where they needed to be. And so I got quite a bit of at least managerial type experience with establishing timelines on who needs to be where and when and what additional equipment's required and things like that. And then, from there I transitioned. I took over the intel and opposition forces. So it was lots of building, like some more managerial type skills, building PowerPoints and trying to decipher intel and come up with slideshows and briefings to give to the guys before they deployed. And then I also had 2 teams of guys that play bad guys where we attacked the students for a couple of years. So I was managing the hit points, the scenarios, and all those types of things, the equipment that was necessary, plus having to research those types of things. And then my last 2 years, they positioned me to run the course. So then I had, it was a large slew of instructors. We used to bring in 54 temporary instructors to include CADM, medics, plus vehicle ops folks, vehicle maintenance, just to keep everything running. On top of that, 150 students at a shot now because we had 3 flights going at one time. So there's lots of leadership opportunities there. And then in my career field, it's fairly small career field, but being in that position, all my chiefs that are current chiefs right now were former students of mine when they were master sergeants, or all the way through chief, because some of them were chiefs when they came through when I was there. And then I had the opportunity to work directly with my now career field manager back in the day. So, so I've been pretty fortunate with the relationships that I've been able to build throughout my military career with people that you can idolize and say, okay, I like this, and you have to learn from the good and the bad. So you'll have some bad experiences with supervisors, and even if that's not yours directly, you hear horror stories of somebody else where they said, oh, my supervisor said or did this. It's like, oh man, yeah, I never want to be that person.
Yeah.
So let me try to do that. So I think for me, there's a very fair balance between being a leader and being a manager. You can do one well or the other well, but in order to be effective, you want to try to have a balance of both.
Right.
You want people to want to follow you, and that's where the leadership comes in. But you also have to really know what you're doing in order to manage the ins and outs of running a flight, especially in the ATC training environment. By no means am I perfect. I have lots of areas where I'm still trying to learn things and figure things out. I think for me, with the move to P&E, being a vehicle ops guy, I think the most difficult thing for me was just like, okay, well, I have no idea what they do. I mean, I know what they do on paper. I've seen it, and I've gone out and I've seen their training and stuff. But all the lesson material stuff. So, one of the first things that I tried to establish when I came here is I'm not the subject matter expert when it comes to the curriculum that you're teaching. However, I do know AETC, and I do know how a course runs. And it runs the same regardless of where you're at. And it's the same thing can be said, when you're operational. Managing a flight anywhere is very similar. Right. Just the stuff that you're tasked to do can vary depending on what MAGCOM you're a part of and what your mission is in that respective squadron. So, fortunately, for LRS and CE, we're in the mission support group, so it's supporting the mission. Right. Whereas maintenance, where it's more operationally mindset. So, right.
So there's one thing that you said a little while ago. It's stuck in my head, and I'm trying to figure out how all this kind of stuff works together. Because you were talking about not necessarily going for like a promote statement or something like that on your EPR. Yeah. And then you talked about when you missed was it 23 points? Mm-hmm. That you took some time for some self-reflection. And somehow that's sticking in my head. Because I don't know, and this may be an oversight on my part, but it's been my experience that not everybody takes that time for self-reflection, and it's possible that I'm just being judgmental, or that I haven't taken time to listen to people or talk to people about that kind of stuff. But it almost seems like that's a rare quality to find somebody that that who will do that, who say, hey, I missed technical sergeant by 12 points. What did I miss? What can I do better? Because I thought I put all my effort in, but maybe I didn't quite, or I thought I put all my effort in so I could get the promote now statement, but I totally didn't. And it seems like I want to say that there tends to be a lot more blame, or is on like Sgt Tokarz didn't do this, or so and so.
To me, it's more a lack of ownership. I mean, you control your career in essence by what you do, your actions. You want to make sure, as a supervisor, someone that's trying to develop and lead and mentor, you want to give your people the tools and the opportunities to set themselves up for success. You can't force anybody to do it. The only thing I can do is I can give you paperwork if you don't show up to work, but I can tell you, hey, you should probably try to volunteer a little bit, or hey, you should get involved in some of the stuff with detachment, or hey, For Leonard Wood's doing this type of thing, or they have this opportunity. Something you might want to think about doing. But if you force someone to do it, they're not going to give you a good product, and it's not going to be something that you're going to want to use on an EPR anyways, which I'm not a fan of doing things strictly for, I did this just to put it on my EPR, or this is good in EPR bullet.
So let's think, is it Sergeant Miller who went up for the Warrior of the Year competition?
Best Warrior competition.
Best Warrior competition? So he doesn't strike me as somebody who said, "Oh, I want to do the best warrior thing because I would like to have a better EPR, or I want to be eligible for Airman of the Year."
He was nominated by his leadership.
He just seems like the sort of guy who would be interested in doing that kind of thing anyway. He would naturally gravitate towards something like that, right?
So I think like with Sergeant Miller is a great tech sergeant now.
Right, yeah.
That he's put on, he's well deserving. He's not in it for the accolades. He gets a lot.
He doesn't strike me as that.
From my experience with him, he does what he does because he likes to do it, and he does it to set himself up for success.
Right.
All the schooling and stuff he does, he's got his priorities in check. So he, in my opinion, I don't know for a fact that he does a lot of self-reflection on what he needs to do and where he wants to be, and he's positioning himself for that. And those are the types of individuals that you can see, just by, well, what do you ask them what they're doing, they tell you what they're up to without any guidance. So yeah, I'm taking a couple of classes, or hey, you as a supervisor, you see the TA requests come in, so you can see who's taking the classes and things like that. So, but I think when this whole new thing came about with the EPR system, it was new and it was uncharted territory, and I don't think we as a service did a proper job of articulating the guidelines that we were supposed to stay inside of, because it was all brand new, so there were no guidelines.
Right.
So we're trying to figure that stuff out as we go. So now looking back over the last couple of years, the way that I'm planning on moving forward is you're not going to know who has the promote now or the must promote. One, I'm not the one who issues it out. It's the commander that issues it out. Mm-hmm. But it's no different. If Sergeant Helgerson, let's say you were one of my airmen and we did our EPR and I gave you a 3, I wouldn't go out to our next flight call and say, hey, everybody, so Sergeant Helgerson got a 3 this year.
Right.
Under the old format. Or you didn't share that stuff. It was between the raider, the raidee, and the only people that really knew was the supervisors in the chain of command. And that's the same way that my plan is moving forward. Is I'll advocate for my individuals. I will do feedback sessions with my guys to let them know what it was that set those that may have got those ratings, and that's the feedback that I've asked for Major Wallace and Senior Master Sergeant Rockey. Whenever Colonel Hustler is done figuring out who's doing what, if he can just come up with a little couple of statements on what set those people apart, what was the main reasons, and that's what I need to brief to my guys. Hey, maybe it was the professional development, maybe it was timeliness of professional development.
And you do that on an individual basis when you close out the EPR, or when you do the performance feedback session, or the midterm performance feedback session, and to say, hey, this is where you're at, this is where you're going on. This is likely what my recommendation is going to be come the end of the year.
Yes. Yep. Right. So this is what you need to do if you're looking to be competitive, because really that's all we can do as an airman is make sure that we're competitive for those things. At the end of the day, it's we make sure that we're ready, and if we get called upon and called to bat, all right, you're ready. Yeah. You're on deck, ready to go. And that's my intent moving forward with the older system. And with the way that the VPC works is I don't get notified as a supervisor when my guys or girls get their EPRs back to sign. They just sign it and send it. It goes to VPC.
Right.
So, there's a lot more communication involved, because before I'd get it back and I'd sign it. I'd go over it with them and then they'd sign it. So you still have to try to figure out a way to try to incorporate that back into the mix.
Right.
So, it's, hey, let's go over your EPR, last year's EPR. We'll talk about the ratings, the markings, the bullets that you had right before we start your initial, and we'll outline a plan for the next year.
A while back, probably about I don't know, it was a while back, I had a conversation with a chief about this new EPR system and how, well, like you said, there was, I don't want to say it was a poor launch of the new EPR system, or I'm not sure exactly how to phrase that, but it seemed like there were definitely some steps that the Air Force should have taken before this just came out, right? And I remember I don't know if you were here or not, but there was a chief that came down from the Pentagon who was on the staff.
Chief Petzel?
Was it Petzel?
Well, I know that she was the...
It wasn't a she, it was definitely a he that came out.
Oh, okay. I know that she was the chief personnelist at the time when it all came out, because I know she went around and did some road shows. So
okay.
It might have been
well, this is when the road show was going on. There was a different chief that came here. And one of the things that I was impressed with was the intention behind the new APR system is that if you walk into a room of staff sergeants, say, and you've got one stripe to pass out.
Yep.
And you say, hey, everybody, we're going to promote one person in here, who should it be? And 9.5 times out of 10, everybody's going to turn around and look at Susie or look at Jim and say, oh, that's the person who steps up, that's the person who leads, that's the person who has those qualities, let's promote that person.
Right.
And I think that was the intent behind this. But that message never kind of trickled down to everybody else.
I can see that, yes.
Right. And instead...
I mean, I heard it, so I don't know that,
Right, yeah. You heard it, I heard it.
Through my channels, it was...
Right, but I don't think that people, like our senior airmen and staffs and techs, I don't know think that they got that message.
I don't know if they didn't get the message or they just didn't understand it when they heard it.
Right.
Especially when you're talking about...
Because, I was already a master sergeant when that came out. So, I heard it and I was like, okay, cool, great. Good luck, fellas.
Yeah.
I got mine. I'm retiring pretty soon.
When you're talking about a change like that was a drastic change,
Right.
Going from the 1 through 5 to the must promote now. Rating things, it was a culture shock. So that first year, all I kept saying was, just wait till the first testing cycle happens. You'll see the people that got the promote still get promoted. It's not just the people that get the promote now or the must promote.
Right.
It's like bonus points.
Right.
That's in essence all it really is. But you want to try to position yourself to where you don't need those.
Right. One thing that I tell people is that it's still on you. The onus is still on you.
Yes.
It's still like, how much do you study? How much do you do the things that are you getting quarterly awards? Are you stepping up and, how much of a leader are you?
Are you positioning yourself effectively within your unit? Because at the end of the day, that's what it comes down to is what you're doing that sets you apart from your peers. Just testing well is no longer the thing, which is good. No. Because that's, in essence, what it was trying to get away from, those guys that were book smart, that couldn't lead themselves out of a wet paper bag, that were getting promoted faster than everyone else because other people were too busy running the shops and managing the people. And so it's to try to help give some of those people an edge. I think there's still a fine balance between volunteering and education. And I was talking to some of the guys about it this morning. Volunteering is a part of it that's not going to go away. But it's not just a box checked. There's lots of things that can be done in volunteering that you won't have at the opportunity as let's say, a staff sergeant. So let's take a staff sergeant, for example. Let's talk here in the detachment. We'll give a prime example. So I've got a guy or girl that loves to do home construction. So they volunteer for Habitat for Humanity or whatever the local program is that rebuilds homes for veterans or less fortunate, whatever. And they do that consistently. Let's say 1 or 2 weekends a month. They're doing that all year. That's good. It's good. It's something they like. It's important. But it's all managed by somebody else. It's organized by someone else. Now, let's say I have a different guy or gal that's running a commander's call or a debt level event. For me, as the commander, I'm the commander now. I'm the squadron commander or whatnot. And I've got this other individual who's, they've done 2 or 3 awards things, maybe a promotion ceremony throughout the course of the same year. Now, granted, this person might have more hours invested by doing the Habitat for Humanity, but what are they leading? Are they bringing a couple extra people with them? What benefit is that managerially? If I'm starting to look at who gets that next stripe. Well, now I've got someone who coordinated with other flights inside of a squadron. They've organized a schedule of events. They come up with timelines. They got all the additional stuff. They wrote a script. So there's lots of tasks that are involved with accomplishing something like that, as opposed to, the email came out, Habitat for Humanity, send an email back saying, I'll volunteer, and going out. So yes, it's great. I'm not trying to knock it in any way, shape, or form. I think I actually like doing Habitat for Humanity, but it's not something that I would use on my EPR. I haven't used it since I was younger. So it's now you're a commander and you're looking at, okay, I've got 1 stripe. I've got 2 staff sergeants. I'll let answer.
Yeah.
P&E Sgt Tokarz.
Again, I want to apologize for cutting the recording short. I've never had a bigger wish for a professional recording studio. But the only other subjects we really talked about were the differences between leadership and teamwork in the vehicle operations career field and in the other career fields in the Air Force, other schoolhouses in particular. Vehicle operations tends to have a different approach than a lot of other career fields, and what other career fields can learn from. Here at the schoolhouse, some of that is due to the approach Mr. Silk takes to leadership. Some of that is just the team of instructors we have here, and some is just luck. A lot of it has to do with the missions they performed during the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan. If you get a chance, take a look at the rack of ribbons and awards that your average vehicle operations NCO has, that he or she were awarded during operations in Iraq and Afghanistan, and really think about the sorts of people and the sorts of experiences and all the things that are involved with earning a rack of ribbons that look like that. But I really don't think that there's any career field in the Air Force that could lose by emulating the folks in any vehicle operations squadron in the Air Force today. I do hope you did take some notes. I hope you got some insight. And most of all, I hope you keep flying, keep fighting, and keep winning.